Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session, Being in Yoga through the Four Paths of Yoga. Before we start the session, I would like to thank the following for the opportunity. Firstly, the Indian Yoga Association for giving this opportunity to have this session as part of the International Day of Yoga in 2022. I would also like to thank Swasth Yoga Institute, which is the institution where I am a faculty and this session is hosted. Swasth Yoga Institute is a program of Swasth Foundation. Swasth Foundation is a not-for-profit NGO established in 2008-9 with the goal of health and joy for all. Before we start, I would like to start with this prayer. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Also play my respect and namaha salutations to the guides who have been through with me during this journey. Shri Swami Vivekanand ji, Shri Aurobindo ji, Hanuman ji, and the inner guru in all of us. Etebhya Gurubhya Namaha. Now, just a quick introduction to me. I am Sandeep Kapila. My introduction is I am a BTech in computer science from IIT Bombay. I passed out in 2001. I've done my MSc in yoga from Swasth University. I did my MD in alternative medicine from the Indian Board of Alternative Medicine. I'm a certified professional coach from the International Coaching Federation. I did a somatic experiencing professional certificate from the Somatic Institute, Training Institute in Colorado, US. I had my 6.5 years at McKinsey & Company in the healthcare and development sector. I did this from 2001 to 2008, right after my BTech in computer science. And I co-founded Swasth after that in 2008 with the mission of health and joy for all. So Swasth Foundation today runs two programs. One is the Swasth Yoga Institute, and the second is Swasth India Medical Centers. Swasth India Medical Centers are 16 centers based in Mumbai, which are servicing the urban poor in Mumbai with doctors, medicines, and now yoga as well. Swasth Yoga Institute is an institute which trains people to become yoga coaches, which work both at our clinics and otherwise. So currently, I'm pursuing my PhD at IIT Bombay in electrical engineering, and I'm a faculty at the Swasth Yoga Institute, which is a program of Swasth Foundation. So with that introduction, let's get going into our topic, and we'll start with a quotation from Swami Vivekanand ji, which basically captures the whole presentation or the session that we are going to explore. So this quotation, I think one of the most common popular ones which we may have come across is as follows, that each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity within by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more or all of these, and be free. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines or dogmas or rituals or books or temples or forms are but secondary details. So in this presentation, we will essentially explore the first part of this statement and go step by step to understand the real meaning behind this. Okay. So as a first step, let's see what is being in yoga. That's the title of the talk. So let's try and understand what is being in yoga. And before that, the first step is to understand what is yoga. So the word yoga, yoga comes from the Sanskrit root word yuj, which has three connotations, right? So these three connotations are Yuj samyoge, which means to jorna, to unite. Yuj samadho, which is to put together or to integrate. And yuj samyame, which is to restrain or to be in equilibrium. Now, different schools of philosophy, the Shat Darshans, emphasize on one or the other of these aspects of the word yoga and accordingly define them. And what is though common across all of these, that there is some element of uniting, of coming together or integrating or restraining. So there are multiple things sort of that seems to indicate, and we are bringing them together in some form, either through unification or through integration or through getting them to be in equilibrium. So it's somehow moving from plurality to some form of unity or oneness. That's the essence. One can define unite and integrate and restrain as slightly different, but the essence of in each one of these is for things to come together. Let's also see some of the other definitions of yoga in the classical texts. And when we see these classical texts, we see that the definitions are both as a journey and as the destination or the goal. So for example, as the journey or the process of yoga, we see in Yog Mashist, it's defined as yoga prashamana upaya, which is yoga is a subtle trick to quieten the mind. Or in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 50, it says, skills in action is yoga, or yoga karmasu kaushalam. In Patanjali Yoga Sutras, towards the end, it describes as the process of involution. So that's the definition as a process. Similarly, these same classical texts also describe yoga as a state, right? So as a state of yoga. And for example, in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, it says, then you will attain the state of yoga, which is samadhi. Or Patanjali Yoga Sutras describe it as yoga chitta vitti nirodha, which is a state of the cessation of the modifications of the mind. Again, in Bhagavad Gita, samatvam yoga uchyate. That's another definition where yoga is defined as equanimity. Similarly, very different other schools, the Shat Darshans, use different words for a very similar state, like moksha, kaivalya, nirvana, jivan mukti, purna. Different words are used to describe a very similar state. Now, this is very unique because typically when we see a word or we come across a concept, it's usually the process or a state. The state is like a noun and the process is a verb. So we are used to using one word as a noun or a verb, right? But yoga is one of those words which has been used in both contexts, right? So same Bhagavad Gita, it says samatvam yoga uchyate and yoga karmashu kaushalam. So both ways we are seeing this word being used, and that sort of makes this whole concept very unique and sometimes also very hard to grasp. And so sometimes we in our context end up using a different word, sort of a made up word called yogification to explain the process of yoga or to refer to the process of yoga, while we use yoga primarily for the state of yoga, that is being in yoga, the end state of being in that state. But to get to that state, the process of yoga is what is needed, the journey as well. We see the same thing being repeated in the modern definitions of yoga as well, to be both the journey and the goal. So in modern definitions, we see the process of yoga. Vivekananda also defines it as a means of compressing one's evolution into a single life or a few months or even a few hours of one's bodily existence. Aurobindoji defines it as a methodical, conscious effort towards self-development of the potentialities latent in the individual. Some of the modern definitions of yoga as a state, as a goal, is defined as a union of the Jivatma with the Paramatma, the oneness when they are coming together, or the union of Chitta with Prana, as is described in the Hatha Yoga text by Swasth. So these are the different definitions of yoga. So this is yoga. We started with what is yoga. Now let's see what does it mean to be in yoga, right? So when that state of being in yoga, that state is being described in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras as, and also the Sankhya Sutras, to be established in oneself, to be swasth, or that is to be me, right? So if you look at the word swasth, etymologically in Sanskrit, it can be broken down as swa plus tha, right? So that means swa means me, oneself, and stha means to be established in. So yoga is that state of being established in oneself. And in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, chapter 1, verse 3, Sutra 3, which is right up front, Patanjali says, Tada drushtu swarupe avasthanam. So then, once we are in that state of yoga, when you have reached that silence of the mind, the chitta vritti nirodha state, then the drushtu, the self, abides, swarupe avasthanam, abides in its own nature, swarupe. So that is the meaning of the word swasth, and which is same as being in yoga. So we often obviously translate the word swasth as being healthy. But what this tells us that health is a natural state that we will be in if we are established in oneself, or we are in this state of yoga. So being in yoga is being swasth, is being established in oneself, or to be me, or hence be healthy. So health, as WHO also defines, is a state not only just of absence of disease, but the state of complete physical, mental, social, and spiritual well-being. And that state is the state of being swasth, of being in yoga. So that's what we mean by being in yoga. Different words are used to translate this, can be used to translate this, but this picture sort of captures it. It's just like a tree which is unapologetically itself fully, and yoga is a process where we can express ourselves fully, just like a tree would give its leaves, have flower itself, have the fruits, share that with the world, provide shade, provide branches for the birds to come. So be part of this beautiful ecosystem that exists. And that's what being in yoga is really about. So when we are in this state of yoga, we are manifesting what is within us. The divinity that's within us gets manifested, and we live our purpose throughout. And that's what Swami Vivekananda ji also said as the purpose of life. So purpose is to be in yoga. The goal is to be in yoga, to manifest the divinity which is within us, so that the fruits, the shade, all the benefits that we have to share with the ecosystem around us, we are able to do that. And at the same time, we are able to draw in the best from the ecosystem around us. Of course, the other words that can be used to describe this state are these, which is union, oneness, onlyness, integration, wholeness, harmony, unity. These are other words which are in English to really capture this, but all of these come together in this one word of yoga. So yoga is bringing all of this together. It's yogifying in some ways. It's integrating, it's uniting all of these contexts and all of these meanings in us, in each individual, so that we can manifest the divinity that is within us. Okay, so now let's look at the process of yoga, the yogification as a process of. One of the key aspects to understand this is to understand how sort of things evolved. So one way to see this is it started off as a blank slate, right? That blank point, the center point, is this state of yoga where everything is one. Of course, the dot looks big, it looks bigger than one, but that is to just make that point. But it's just that state where everything is one. There is nothing else. That's the state of yoga. Now, from that, as there is evolution, there is a will, and there is certain boundary that created, that connection starts getting created between this swa, this self that we have, and it starts expressing itself. And through this layer of connection, it expresses itself in the field of pluralities. This field of pluralities is governed by the gunas, the three gunas, the tamas, rajas, and sattva. And that's where our thoughts and emotions exist, our life energy, our prana exists, and our body exists. And this is often also known as the annamaya kosh, the pranamaya kosh, and the manomaya kosh. The connection is where we have the vijnanamaya kosh. And through this field of pluralities, when we exist in it, in the three gunas, it's so complex, it's so plural, that we lose connection with our true self. And that's what the cause of dis-ease is. When we are swasth, we are at ease. But when we lose the connection with our swasth, with our swa, with our self, then we see dis-ease, or we become aswasth. But yoga is the process. The yogification is the process where we get reconnected to ourselves. And through this process of reconnection of the self, it leads us back to our Swasth through this subjective experience of this. And that's where this layer of connection is different for each one of us. Some of us experience it as silence, some as wisdom, some as flow, some as inner voice, some as now being in the present, some as freedom, stillness, peace, and love. This layer then brings us back and connects us back, excuse me, to our true self. This is the process of yoga and how we exist between both this external reality of ours, right, which is made up of the body, the life energy, the thoughts and emotions. And it's through this connection layer of what is known as a Vijnanamay Kosh, we connect with our self, our true self, which is the Anandamay Kosh. Excuse me. So this process of reconnecting with our true self through this is what's known as the process of yoga. So the important thing to note is that there is a two-way movement in this process of yoga. The first is an outside-in movement, which is an inward movement, where we harmonize the pluralities in our experience. We move from pluralities to oneness. We see the patterns, we see the commonalities, and we see that it's finally the one. We experience it that. Right? So from finding the complexity, reducing the complexity to bringing it to simplicity to unification. So that's the one part of the process. Similarly, the second aspect of this process is an outward movement. The movement which is what we call as inside out, where we anchor ourselves in our wholeness, in our completeness, in the principles like silence, like love, like peace, like wisdom, like now, like stillness. So we anchor ourselves in those experiences and allow that to be manifested externally in the world. So that movement is from our internal to external. Right? So this two-way movement is constantly happening, and it's about being aware of this movement in this journey, where we are harmonizing what is diverse, what is plural. We are trying to bring it back to oneness. We are trying to bring it back to that one principle of Swa. And similarly, anchoring in ourselves those principles, those manifestations of Swa that we experience, like love, peace, joy, oneness, wisdom, stillness, silence, and allowing that to be expressed in the world outside of us. So this two-way movement exists during this process of yoga. So that's the simple thing that I wanted to please share my experience of how I have been through this journey. So let me quickly summarize what we have seen of what being in yoga is. So firstly, and how that connects with this statement. So we have explored this first sentence, that each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity within. And we have seen this as the purpose of doing yoga is to reach this state of yoga, so that we can manifest this divinity within us. And that happens when we are established in oneself. We are Swasth, we are ourselves. And we have seen that the essence of the process of yoga is to control nature, which is both external and internal. And we saw this in the form that the process of yoga happens through working these two components, which is external, which we can call as the field, where the three gunas of tamas, rajas, sattva operate, and the internal self, which is our true layer, which works with a connection layer, which is often known as the Vijnanamay. And we also saw that there is a two-way movement, the outside in and the inside out movement. And that's why the sense of control is needed, because there is a default flow in those directions. We can direct that flow. And by directing that flow is when we are able to operate with the processes of yoga. That's where the tools of various yoga come handy to us. And we use those. So now let's see what those processes are in very short, because we don't have the time to explore them in full. Now, what Vivekanand ji says is, do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy. So he has given these 4 paths or 4 categories of paths that we can use to control this nature, external and internal, to see this inside out and the outside in movements. So we'll see some examples of that. But let's see what these are and how these are known. So the 4 paths of yoga that are there, the most important thing to remember as we start on these paths is that these are the different processes which lead to the same goal. It's like there are 4 streams merging into the same river. Each one of those 4 streams also have their sub-streams. So Gyan Yoga, Raj Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karam Yoga, they have their sub-paths. Each one has their own path. And as we go on this journey, we should make sure we remember that each is a different, unique path. We'll probably carve out our own unique path, but we are getting to the same goal. So it's not about which path is better, which path is the best amongst all. It's really about which path suits me the most. Where am I? Which is the one I am nearest to? So I can get onto that path, get onto that stream, so I can flow towards my goal. Because the goal is the same, the destination is the same. We have to just follow the path that is most aligned with us. It's not about which is the best path. It's about which path is most aligned with me at this point. And this also evolves. Sometimes the path also changes. Sometimes it's a mixture of paths, and we'll see that. But it's not definitely about which is the best path. It's about what works for me right now, which is most aligned with me. What can I stay consistent with? Because if I stick to any of these paths, any of these streams, I will reach the goal. But I need to stay on the stream. That's the important thing. So that's the important aspect about the 4 streams of yoga. And let's quickly see what are those 4 streams of yoga. The first one is, as he said, by philosophy, or that's known as Gyan Yoga, by psychic control, that's known as Raj Yoga, and by worship, which is known as Bhakti Yoga, and lastly, by work, which is known as Karam Yoga. Each of these paths has its own depth, has its own nuances. They are detailed in their own ways. I think in this one short session, I can't take you through those paths, but what I'll try and do at least is give examples of what that means, of how we can at least integrate these paths. What can we do to start implementing some aspects in our path? At least I'll share my experience on what I do. And that comes from this, where he then says, from these 4 paths, by one or more or all of these. So it's again not about which is the best path. It's not about any one. You could choose one, you could choose one more than one, or you could choose all of them. And through that, we control nature and external and internal. So I'll just show one way of at least how I have done that. So for example, one potential way of integrating the paths, and this is from the, as you can see, is inside out. So what is the anchor? What is the mindset that I can adopt from these 4 paths? And this is what I have done for myself, how I have understood it, and that's what I'm sharing here. So for example, for me, the anchor that comes from Gyan Yoga as I live my life is this, that the Gyan Yoga says that the goal is to experience the self. Often the common thing, I think we understand Gyan as knowledge, and we confuse knowledge with information. So knowledge is not really information. So even if you look at the English word knowledge, it means to experience. It's what I know through my experience, not through books, not through information. That is information. What I can get through books is information. That's not knowledge. Knowledge I can gain only through experience. And what an example of that often is given is, if you have never eaten an apple and somebody describes in the book or tells you in a talk how does an apple taste? You can listen, but you will never know how an apple tastes till you actually eat it. So only by experiencing the eating of the apple can you gain the real knowledge, true knowledge of what an apple tastes like, right? And same way, what Gyan Yoga tells us is that our goal is to experience ourselves, is to know ourselves, is to have Gyan of ourselves. And that means to experience the self. So that's the essence of Gyan Yoga for me, saying the goal, it sets the goal for me in a very clear way is to experience self. Now, what Raj Yoga then tells me is that I can experience myself only when my mind reaches silence on its own. This is one way of understanding the second sutra of Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which is the text for Raj Yoga, which says Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So when my mind reaches silence on its own, Nirodha, not Virodha, it's automatic cessation. When I am able to get my mind to a state of silence, which is Chitta Vritti, then I can experience myself. Otherwise, I can't, because there is so much noise in my mind that I will not know what is self, what is not self. I won't be able to experience myself. I'll just be listening to talk. So the important thing that Raj Yoga tells me, in which the thought, the experience that I am anchored in, is saying to experience myself. The only way I can do it is when my mind reaches silence on its own. So that's what I take away from Raj Yoga, to get my mind to be in a state of silence on its own. Now, Bhakti Yoga gives me the method for it. So, Bhakti Yoga tells me that my mind will be silent or is silent when all my emotions are transformed to supreme love for divine. Because the Narad Bhakti Sutra says, Sa tvasmin param prem rupa. So, Bhakti is the supreme love for Ishwar, is the supreme love for divine. And that I am able to experience when my emotions are transformed into this. And when I transform my emotions into that supreme love for divine, then my mind reaches silence. Because the only reason my mind is not silent right now is because I experience emotions. I experience success and failure. I experience happiness and sadness. Any emotion, whatever I experience, brings a certain sound, a certain noise to my mind. And that doesn't allow my mind to be silent. Sadness wants me to go away from it. Unpleasant emotions want me to go away from them. It makes me do things so that I don't experience them. And pleasant emotions like happiness draw me towards them, attract me towards them, makes me want to do those things, makes me want to think, how can I again experience them? In both of them, I am not able to reach a state of silence. Because in one, I am constantly thinking, when I am sad, how to avoid it. And when I am happy, I am thinking how to get it again. But only when both happiness and sadness, I am able to transform as love for divine, the supreme love for divine, which is just love for its own sake. In that state, I am neither happy nor sad. I am just love. And when I experience that, I experience silence. And when my mind is silent, I can experience a little bit of myself, my true self. So that's what Bhakti Yoga tells me. How I can transform my emotions. My goal is to transform my emotions to the supreme love for divine. And Karam Yoga, as I said, tells me on how I can transform my love, transform my emotions to the supreme love for divine. And I can do that when I act as an instrument of the divine. If I surrender my activities to the divine, if I treat success and failure the same, if I don't become too happy with success or too sad with failure, then I can transform my emotions to supreme love for divine. So in this way, anchored in this thought process, inside out, I'm able to anchor myself in that with these 4 paths, what I have learned, and actually start doing my activities, my things. Whatever I do, I try and do it from this place, anchoring in these thoughts, so that I can experience myself, which is the state of yoga. So that's the inside out way of possibly integrating the 4 paths, something that I try and do. Similarly, the 4 paths also give us techniques, tools on how to harmonize, how to work outside in, how to move inward, how to harmonize the pluralities while we stay anchored in this thought of surrendering our actions, of transforming all the emotions to the supreme love, of silencing the mind, of experiencing the self. What do we do practically on a day-to-day basis in this plural world? So what tools, techniques, each of these paths give, which I try and adopt in my life. So what's that? So Gyan Yoga tells me to apply and learn based on the process of Shravan, Manan, and Nididhyasana from life experiences. So Gyan Yoga is all about life experiences and learning from them. From seeing life experiences, listening to thoughts, contemplating, applying, and then learning. So Shravan, listen, contemplate, Nididhyasana, to apply and learn from life experiences and see what is not the self. It's only by going through this process of identifying what is not the self can we reach the place where we identify ourselves. So this process of contemplation, application, learning, introspection comes from Gyan Yoga for me. So I use that technique which I get from Gyan Yoga. Raj Yoga gives so many techniques. The whole Ashtang Yoga is part of Raj Yoga, which is the Yam, Niyam, Asana, Pranayam, Pratyahar, Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi. So Raj Yoga gives us a full set of techniques to help us harmonize the pluralities. Which my favorites are, of course, I do Asana and Pranayam to prepare my body and breath for silence of my mind. I realize that my mind won't be silent if my body and breath aren't. So Asana and Pranayam are techniques which help me with that, and those is what I use. And that's oftentimes now a lot where yoga is actually known as. So yoga is this, right? While we are talking of yoga, which is what the original word is, but yoga we know as asana and pranayam. That's the most popular way that it's gotten known. That's also to some extent how I got introduced to yoga when I was suffering from hyperacidity about 14-15 years ago. And this just asana pranayam, that technique itself prepared my body to complete now 3 triathlons from a place where I couldn't run 100 meters. I had hyperacidity, GERD, and yeah, I couldn't eat anything after 7:30 in the night. So it was a very difficult place at the age of 28 to be there and being told I have to eat 2 medicines every day for the rest of my life. I said that's not something I can do. And that's where these tools of asana and pranayam came very handy, helped me discover my body, my breath, make it healthy to the extent that I could achieve completing these 3 triathlons, half marathons, etc. But it also introduced me to this whole world of yoga and saying there is more than that. But this was a starting point. So without these tools, my mind cannot even reach anywhere close to silence. So I think these are wonderful tools which I still use. And of course, there is Yam, Niyam, Pratyahar, Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi, the other tools also of Ashtanga Yoga that come from the Patanjali Yoga Sutras and from the path of Raj Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is wonderful because it gives me the tools to express my love for my divine. And my divine is Hanumanji. So it gives me a simple practice of reciting Hanuman Chalisa twice a day with the intention of expressing my love for Hanumanji, whose servant I am, whose friend I am. So just giving me that tool of reciting, of saying something to express my love for him on a regular basis, right? My unconditional love for Hanumanji. So that's what Bhakti Yoga gives me tools. There are many other tools, the Panch Bhav, the Nav Vidhi, that we all can use. But the essence of Bhakti, of those tools, is to express our love, our supreme love for whatever our object of devotion is. We can choose our object of devotion. It could be a deity like Hanumanji, it could be a lord, it could be a book, it could be a mantra, it could be a concept, whatever, or an abstract Ishwar, an impersonal Ishwar, or a personal Ishwar. But the essence of bhakti is to be, and the process of bhakti is to be able to express our love for our object of devotion. And my object of devotion is Hanumanji, so I recite the Hanuman Chalisa twice a day to express my love, and this gives me a great opportunity to be able to do that. So this path taught me that. And Karam Yoga, of course, the path it teaches me is to do all my actions as a service to Ramji. So of course, my object of devotion is Hanumanji, who himself is the Param Bhakt, the servant of Lord Sri Ram. And so I am a servant of Lord Sri Ram, and I do all my actions in service to Ramji. That's what Karam Yoga teaches me and enables me, hence, to let go of the success and failure, of to surrender fruits of my action to Ramji and live in peace, transform my emotions to love for Hanumanji and reach a place of silence. So that's one way. Again, this is just a way, potential way. I thought I'll share my example of doing that, and in that also give some idea of what these four paths are. But each one of them has their own depth. There is so much in each one of them to explore. But it's really for each one of us to create our own path, our own unique mix and match of these paths. Some may choose only one path. That is also fine. As we saw what Vivekanand Ji said, by one or more or all of these. Right? So we can choose one, two or three or four, all of them. I have chosen to go with all four. And this is how I choose right now to do this, to express or integrate these four paths in my life. I'm also going to share with you now an example of another great, my object of devotion, Hanumanji, of how his life is really a role model of integrating these four paths. He is really a role model of these four paths, and the stories. His stories gives us enough information that if we want to actually integrate the four paths, how we can do that integration. And that starts with the first verse of the Hanuman Chalisa itself, which goes as follows: Jai Hanuman Gyan Gun Sagar. So just at his introduction, the first chaupai of Hanuman Chalisa is an introduction to who Hanumanji is, and it starts with Gyan Gun Sagar, that he is the ocean of knowledge and qualities. So he is the Gyani. He has experienced his self, and hence he is a role model of Gyan Yoga as well. And one of the stories that goes to me, which showcases his Gyan, is that there's a story which goes by where Valmiki ji, when he was writing his Ramayana, he wrote his Ramayana, and he decided to share it with Hanumanji because he knew he was the Param Bhakt of Sri Ram for his comments. And Hanumanji read it and said it's fantastic. And then Hanumanji also said that I also have written a Ramayana. Ramayana literally means the travels of Ram, right, or the story of Ramji. So he says, I have also written my version. Would you care to read it? And it was written on leaves, etc. That's a legend. And so Valmiki ji read it, and he had tears flowing down his eyes as he read it. And Hanumanji asked what happened. He said, it is so beautiful that nobody will now read my Ramayana, because this Ramayana is so beautiful. It's your experience of Ramji. It's your Gyan, your knowledge of Ramji. It's so wonderful. And as Hanumanji heard that, he let those leaves flow in the river, the water that was flowing by, and let it go. So we unfortunately don't have that Ramayana. But then Valmiki ji asked him, why did you do that? He said, I just wrote this Ramayana for myself. It wasn't for anybody else. It was my love for Ram, and I wrote it for that. So that's how Gyani and Guni he is, the ocean of knowledge and qualities. That's Hanumanji. That's one of his stories depicting his Gyan. So then we see he is Jai Kapish, Tihu Lok Ujagar. So he's also known as Kapish, which is the lord of the monkeys, right? But we know in Ramayana, he is not the lord of the monkeys. He's not the king of the monkeys, right? The king was Sugriv or Bali. So then why is known as Kapish? Kapish means Kapi Ish, which is Ish, the lord of Kapi. Kapi is a monkey. So what is he, the Kapi? Why is he called the Kapish? Because he is a lord of the monkey mind. He has full control over his mind, the psychic control that Vivekanand ji talked about. So he is a Raj Yogi. He is a Raj Yogi because he is the lord of the monkey mind. He has reached that state of silence of the mind. He is in full control of his mind. That's why he's known as Kapish. Not because he is lord of the monkeys, but he's lord of our monkey mind. And there are so many, again, illustrations in his stories where he has shown those magical powers that Patanjali ji talks about in Yoga Sutras, that one gets so simple like Ashta Siddhi. So he had all the Siddhis, right? He could be as big as he wanted. He could Mahima as small as he wanted. Anima. He had all those Ashta Siddhis. In fact, then later on, he gets a boon from Mother Sita that he can now also give or gift these Siddhis to anybody who wants. Hanuman Chalisa has this Ashta Siddhi now, Nidhi ke Data. So he's the giver of these Siddhis now. That's how an accomplished Raj Yogi he is. Numerous stories in Ramayana where he has either become super large, super small, where he's used these siddhis, he could jump across the ocean, etc. So he is a Raj Yogi. Again, his stories illustrate that. So then we see Jai Hanuman Gyan Gun Sagar, Jai Kapish Tihulok Ujagar, Ram Doot. So the next quality, next introduction of him is that he is Ram Doot. So after all this, all the powers, all the knowledge that he has, he is Ram Doot. That's his bhakti. He's known as the Bhakt Raj. He's a messenger of Ram. He is not himself the hero. He is just messenger of Ram. So he is a Bhakt. He is a Bhakti Yogi in that sense. When he went to meet and find rather Mother Sita, and he found her in Ashok Vatika, he had all the powers to bring back Mother Sita, right? He could have just lifted her, brought her on the shoulder. No war would have happened. Nothing would have happened. Everything would have been sorted. But that was not his job. He was the messenger of Ram. He knew what was his duty and what was Ramji's duty. So that is being a Bhakt, to do the task that has been assigned to you, even though we can do so much more. Our capabilities allow us to do more, but we do the task that is assigned to us by Ramji. That is being Bhakt. So he is the epitome of Bhakti. And this is one of the common stories, the picture that we see where he's opening up his heart. So the story goes that after the coronation, Ramji, there were many people, many guests who came, who brought many gifts for everybody. And he was sitting right next to Ramji. He also got some gifts. He got pearls, rubies, precious stones. And what was he doing? He picked up a pearl, he would bite it, open it, he would see it, and then throw it away. He would pick another pearl, see it, bite it, open it, throw it away. And people would say, why are you throwing these precious stones away? These are so valuable. Why are you throwing them away? And he would say, I'm just looking for if there is Ram inside them. And when I open, there is no Ram inside them. So they are useless for me. I throw them out. So then people said, wow, so that's your bhakti, that's your devotion to Ram. He said, yeah, but he says, then do you have, your body doesn't have Ram, it's useless. He says, who says there is Ram inside me? And that's the legend when he opens up his chest to show Ram Lakhan Sita Manvasiya, to show Ram Lakshman and Sita in his heart. They are always there. That it's in his, otherwise his life would be useless. So that's him as a Bhakti Yogi, as a role model for us on what Bhakti Yogi means to be a Bhakt. And he's often known as Bhakt Raj. And last, as Karam Yog, we see Ramadut Atulit Baldhama. So he has Atulit Bal, unmatched strength to do the work of Ram. Because that's what he does. Ram Kaj Karibe Ko Atur. So his unmatched strength is only there because he has to do the work of Ram. All his work, his action, his karam is in service to Ram, is surrendered to Ram, to Ramji. And that's what makes him a Karam Yogi. And what that allows, when he's a Karam Yogi, this picture says it all. He can lift mountains. And that's one of the favorite stories where during the Ramayana war, in a single night, he first goes from Lanka to Himalayas. He can't identify the herb that he needs. So he grows in size, picks up the entire mountain, flies back with the mountain, picking it up. That's what that image is. That's the kind of strength that comes when we are dedicated in our work and surrender all our actions to Ram or to whoever our object of devotion is, right? So this is just a story to his life is a role model to tell us what Karam Yoga is. This is what makes one a Karam Yogi. And one of my favorite stories on that about Hanumanji is the fact that when he was a child, he was born with some special powers, right? And one day he was hungry. He was telling his mother, like any child, "Mom, I am hungry," but his mother was busy. The sun was rising. He thought it was a fruit, so he leapt towards the sun. And with the special powers that he had, he grew in size. He went through space, and as the sun grew, he also grew big in size, and finally opened his mouth and he ate the sun. And the world went into darkness. So all the other deities panicked, and they went to the Lord, which is Indra, and said, "We need to free up sun." And so Indra sent his bolt, which was the most deadliest weapon, threw at Hanumanji, which hit him on his chin. And there was a mark, and that's what literally the word Hanuman means. There's a chin, a mark on the chin. And he fell down unconscious. His mouth opened up, sun came out, and it became bright again. But at that point, Hanumanji, he was lying unconscious. He's the son of Vayu, or air. So air got very upset, saying, why did you attack my son?" So he said, "I will withdraw air from earth." So again, the entire life was in trouble, because there was no air. So then all the deities came and they said, "No, we'll bless him. He's your son." They gave him more special powers, woke him up. Air was back. But then the discussion also happened that while he has all the powers, he does not have right now the wisdom to know when to use what, and that can result in trouble. So they said, for some time, he will forget what his powers are. And when he needs them, he'll get it back. So then the child Hanuman forgot his powers. And when did he get them back? He got them back when he had to do the first task for Ram, which was to find Sita Ji. So in search of Sita Ji, they end up at this edge of the Indian peninsula, where there is a 800-mile ocean across that has to be left. And that was the target. Everyone knew they had to jump 800 miles in one direction. And they asked who will volunteer. Everyone was saying, "I can jump 50 miles. Someone was saying, "I will jump 100. But 800 miles was too much for everybody. But that's when Hanumanji was reminded of his powers. And he got his powers back because he was in service to his Lord, which is Ramji. And then he left, and then he did many other wonders because he got his power back in service of Ramji. And that, to me, symbolically means that's, I think, the story of every human. When we are born, we have a very empty mind. Our nervous system is still building up. We have immense potentiality. We can do so much. Then life happens, things get constrained, our powers get limited as we grow up. But now, as adults, we have that option of again reclaiming our powers. What this story tells us, we'll get back our powers when we dedicate all our actions to our Lord, to something bigger than us. When we work in service of something bigger than us, that's when we get back all our powers. Atulit Baldhama, we get unmatched strength to face any challenge. And things happen. And that's Karam Yoga. That's the lesson we learn on Karam Yoga. There's so many more stories of Hanumanji, and his life is really a role model on yoga for me. It starts with the first Chopai, where he's introduced as all 4 yogis, having those qualities. And of course, Hanuman Chalisa details out a lot more, but his life is a real role model. So one way of learning about the 4 parts of yoga, of being in yoga, is to learn it through the life of Hanumanji. Okay, so we're coming to the last part of this sentence. He said, "Buy one or more or all of these and be free." So ultimately, what we are trying to do is be free. So what are we being free from? It's free from external desires. It's free from attachments. And being free from external desires and being free from external attachments is only when we are content, when we are joyful. So this freedom from external desires is to be content. And this comes up in Bhagavad Gita again, chapter 2, verse 55, which is Atmani ev atmana tushta sthit pragya tada uchyate. So this is Lord Krishna telling Arjun in response to the question where Arjun asked, what does a sthit pragya, a person steadfast in wisdom, a person in yoga, what is his quality? What are his qualities? How does that person behave, look like? What is the quality? And this one sentence is the essence of it, which is Atmani ev Atmana Tushta, which means Tushta means to be content, to be joyful, to be satisfied, to have no desires. Right? Being satisfied is to have no external desires. And how are we satisfied? When we are satisfied in the self, only by the self. So when one is fulfilled in the self, only by the self. We don't need anything else to make us fulfilled, to make us satisfied, to make us content, to make us joyful. That's when we are in yoga. That's the state of being in yoga. That's another way to look at being in yoga. To be satisfied, to be content, to be joyful, only by the self and in the self. Nothing else is needed. Right? So this, in one simple way, it tells us this, that the other side of yoga is joy. That yoga and joy are really the two sides of the same coin. And this is a coin actually made and carved, not too great in terms of skill, but it's a physical coin that you can flip and see that actually it is two sides of the same coin. Even in English, yoga and joy happens to be a good coincidence. But that's what it is. When we are content, joyful in ourselves, by ourselves, that's the state of yoga. That's being in yoga. And with that, I'll introduce you towards a simple practice that we can start doing just after this session to start a journey in being in yoga, right? Which is to find every day at least 5 minutes for yourself. We are suggesting at the start of the day so that you don't get caught up with other things and can focus on this. But just 5 minutes, start with 5 minutes, minimum 5 minutes, at least 5 minutes. And what do you do in those 5 minutes? Pick up an activity which you do with joy. So important thing is that you do it with joy. And a joy will also be the outcome. Right? So something you can do with yourself, only alone, with joy. And you find joy in that. Do it with joy, and there will be joy in it. And do it with this spirit, Atmani eva Atmana Tushta. So see, take it as your time, no disturbance. See it as an active expression through the field, through your thoughts, emotions, life energy, body. Do it through that. Try and avoid it as a passive listening. I know listening to music, reading, all those sometimes are good passive activities, but in this, try and make it more active. Not meditation, but make it more active. Do something with your body where you are engaging your body, your thought, your life energy. There is some movement. So engage yourself. It could be a daily chore like cooking, but do it with joy. That's okay. But see if it is something else. Can you take out this 5 minutes beyond what you would anyway be doing? If you can't do it, you can do cooking with joy also. And try and do the same activity at the same time with joy. Every day, minimum 5 minutes. So just 5 out of 1440 minutes in a day. So we are saying start your journey of Atmani eva Atmana Tushta, of being content with yourself for 5 minutes out of the 1440 minutes. So if you see, this is probably 0.3%, not even 1%. 1% of this will be 14 minutes, so just 0.3%. 0.3% of your day, just take it for yourself. So you are content with yourself. And some suggested activities are like drawing, painting, singing, dancing, gardening, engaging with nature, laughter. So this, you don't have to be good at it. Know that it's about doing it with joy. So just coloring randomly, but doing it joyfully, not worried about the outcome, not thinking whether the painting, the drawing, whether I'll sing well, am I dancing correct, but just letting your body loose and enjoying yourself for those 5 minutes a day. Yeah. So that's the activity. that you can start immediately. Try it and see. This is something I started with about a few years ago now, and it stays. That 5 minutes has become way more. It's about an hour now. I'm surprised. People used to say I can't find 5 minutes. I used to say I couldn't find 5 minutes, but now it's easily an hour. And the rest of the day, I'm able to get more done than I was before, because it fills me with that joy, with that contentment, and the day is far better. So that's why we suggest do it at the start of the day if you can. Don't worry about whether you're doing it well or not. Just do it. Yeah. So just do it with joy. That's the idea. Doing it with joy, which gives you fulfillment in some ways. Okay. So with that, we'll come to a close. But before that, I'll just summarize the whole session, what all we looked at. We said yoga is the journey and the goal. It is the process and the end state. So that way, yoga as a concept is quite unique, quite distinct, that it encapsulates both the process and the end state, or the journey and the goal or destination. We saw that the state of yoga, the end state of yoga, is the same as swasth, or being yourself, being established in yourself. That is the state of yoga. It can also be seen as a state of union, of oneness, or onlyness, integration, wholeness, harmony, unity, many words which also sort of try and capture the essence of this state of yoga. We saw that the process of yoga has a two-way movement, that there is the external and the internal. There is a connecting layer, and hence there are two movements. There's an inward movement where we are coming from outside to inside, from pluralities to oneness. And similarly, there's an outward movement where we are going from inside to out, where from oneness to pluralities, we are anchoring ourselves in certain thoughts, beliefs, emotions, expressions, or states like silence, love, peace, joy, and we express that outwardly. We saw that there are the four processes of yoga as defined, but they all lead to the same outcome. That it's not about which is the best process, best path, best way to do it. It's really about finding my own unique path. What works for me when? What is aligned with me now in this current moment? Working with that. That's what finding the path, the four processes of yoga is about. Then we quickly went into understanding the four paths of yoga, which is the Gyan Yoga or philosophy, the path of Raj Yoga or psychic control, the path of Bhakti Yoga or worship, the path of Karam Yoga or work through work. We saw the examples and the best role model, at least for me, the life of Hanumanji, how he's emulated all the four paths of yoga, and different aspects of his life show us, demonstrate to us these four paths of yoga. That this can be integrated, it can be there all or one or more together. Lastly, what is important is to be free. Free from the desires, to be content, to be joyful. That's the final state that we want to get to through these four paths. Reach a state where we are content, we are satisfied with ourselves, through ourselves. And most importantly is to practice it. So practice it with 5 minutes of joy every day. Do something involving your body, your mind, your emotions, your thoughts, your life energy. Do something 5 minutes a day with joy every day. Try and fix the time, do it regularly, and begin your first step to being in yoga. Begin your journey towards being in. With that, we'll come to the close of our session. We'll close it with a prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhave. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you, everyone. This is our website and the email address where you can contact us. If there are any questions, queries, thoughts, comments, please share your opinion. Thank you so much. Thank you.